many people don't realize is that 90% of population growth will take place in cities. 90% of wealth creation will take place in cities, and cities are also responsible for about 70% of global emissions. So the reality is, if we are to address the grand challenges of our era, from climate change, public health, jobs for a changing economy, we have to focus on urban areas. That's really where all the action is. So much of the effort to address these challenges are governmental top-down programs. But what we are exploring is how local communities, mayors, people who live in cities and their local communities can address these challenges in a bottom-up, community-driven way that, if scaled to communities all across the planet, can address some of these grand challenges. We have this notion that the planet is becoming a network of cities. So the cultural and economic power, not really in national governments anymore, but really in those major cities. We think that strong, healthy, vibrant, successful, sustainable cities in the future will be a network of communities, of strong, vibrant communities. Therefore, the essential scale to work at, we think, is the community. We think that if one is to do this, you need to bring together excellent ideas about design, excellent technology, and enlightened public policy. You know, there are no magic bullet solutions. There are a lot of people who say, you know, we have the right solution. It's some technological magic bullet fix. You know, electric vehicles or solar power will save the planet. That's not the case. That helps, but it's just some incremental improvement. Or many architects, urban planners will say, you know, if we just get the right master plan, we'll fix it, or the right government policy for taxes. But it really takes the combination of all three. So what we are looking at is a new process for cities that starts with data analytics to understand what the current conditions are in a city in a very fine-grained way, what the social, the economic, the environmental performance of a city is. But that's only the beginning. Then we identify all of those interventions that could transform the city. This could be design, technology, public policy, a whole long list of those. But it requires then that we build these powerful simulation tools to predict the impacts of each of those proposals so we can make informed judgments. We can then take those kind of prediction models, put them into a platform that allows communities to understand the issues and make informed decisions about their future, because you can have all kinds of great ideas, but unless you bring government and the citizens and the companies together, then nothing big changes. And then finally, we need the governance models to put them in place and to sustain them over time so we can transform communities from what in reality many communities are now. They're auto-centric, very inefficient, social ties are fragmenting, they're not very entrepreneurial, and bring them together to create much more vibrant, entrepreneurial, low-carbon cities with a very high quality of life, but that are prepared for the future. Well, let's go back in time to the 1927. That's a good date to start with. That is when the Supreme Court in the US validated zoning, which separated functions. It allowed communities to establish zones. That's why they call it zoning. Zones for housing, zones for commercial, zones for industrial. That also coincided with the 15th millionth Model T Ford that rolled off the assembly line, so everybody could afford an inexpensive car, in effect. And highways were put into place, so these zones that are separated were connected by roadways, and people then could live remote from where they worked or shopped and drive to those locations. And we're still living in that world 100 years later, where we're completely dependent on the automobile. And if we're going to address climate change, we need to move beyond that. Just moving from internal combustion engines to electric vehicles only makes a very small difference when you look at the challenge that we're facing. On the other hand, now if you develop a compact community where people can live near where they work and can have walkable, bikeable access to the amenities that they need in daily life, then you're not dependent on these conventional automobiles, and one can look at much lighter weight modes. So what we are prototyping, what Naroa talked about, are lightweight, autonomous, shared use vehicles that you would call for like you do an Uber. They come to you wherever you are, and you can drive them to your destination and release them, and then autonomously they can go to perform a mobility service for people. Now these lightweight vehicles consume a tiny fraction of the energy of a conventional car, tiny fraction of emissions from conventional vehicles, even electric vehicles, because the emissions are huge with an electric vehicle because of all the embodied energy. So you need to reduce both the operational energy and the embodied energy. So these lightweight mobility modes that are hyper efficient work only when you rethink community to have housing and amenities and jobs all in close proximity. People don't limit their movement only to a local community, but that would effectively end commuting. So that's a huge benefit to society, but still people need to go to other areas. I think we can begin to look at moving away from mass transit. I think the old concept of fixed route rail systems or even bus systems with stops probably in 20 years will be obsolete, that we will see dynamically routed shuttles that have some of the efficiency of an automobile. In other words, you can go from point to point, but with the efficiency of mass transit. So dynamically routed shuttles pick someone up at their community, at their front door. Maybe when they're going to another area, they can be platooned, so they may be digitally tethered, so they in effect form a train. We could use a dedicated lane on the highway for high-speed, hyper-efficient transport, using mass transit in this case. And then they can separate and deliver people to their destination. So I think that kind of point-to-point mass transit for long distance, and then use of these hyper-efficient, very lightweight modes locally in the community could completely transform transportation.